Okay, so napkin and wooden stick. Okay. Plastic flowers. Okay. Rabbit.
Juffrouw,
Mobius ribbon.
er is te veel geniet.
Hairbrush. Yes. Plastic ball.
Plastic ball? Yes. Andrea, ga je bak halen met spullen? Bak halen.
No,
Daar. Een van de vakjes.
yeah. No, for the the bucket.
In die emmer met het ding. Individueel. Dat is daar.
Okay. Little piece of coffee blind.
Yes.
So can you
Under those stop. You put the doos. We gaan er nu wat gebeuren. Pak een schaar. Kijk, even kijken. Kijk naar ogen.
balls? In paper. In the mouth.
Belasting.
Sean is er.
En dat is natuurlijk gebouwd.
Daar zit het vooraan.
En lekker koken.
Can you tell them that it was very good in the morning, but you need to change it?
Maar ga door. Ja, jullie.
So they have to take the time more.
Wie mis ik hier?
Now just gesture one after the other.
Ja, we gaan nu alleen de plaatjes oefenen.
Ja, dus die bewegingen, hè?
Ja, we gaan de plaatjes maken.
So who is Saburo Murakami breaking so many paper screens? You and you.
Wie houdt het vast?
Okay, so they can play it without the paper.
Zonder papier, gewoon staan.
Okay?
Gewoon even staan nu.
Just to practice.
Gewoon staan, die moet zo staan. Johnny en... Ja. Ja, zij staan. Zonder papier, gewoon staan. En dan ga jij alvast.
Yeah. Yeah. And after Robert Morris, iBox.
Hij box, we gaan het doen. Maar wie gaat het nu doen?
Badminton, hij gaat badminton spelen. En daar kan zitten en voetballen. Iets naar achter.
Je bent aan het werk, no?
No.
Kom eens over lekker.
No, mami, no con la mano.
Oh ja, wie zou dat doen? Kom even staan, concentratie, je moet eerst goed mikken. Eerst goed mikken.
It's better if you, for example, here.
Steun, ja, steun staan.
Yeah, like this. But, yeah. When you wait.
Echt mikken. Dan bam.
Exactly. You say that and then you go. No, you don't do too much. Just say and then you go back to it.
Is het lekker? Ja. It's 50 cent. 50 cent.
And then
50.
Yeah.
50. Oh, 50. Dat is de helft.
15 is 1,5.
Is 1,5. 1,5. Is 50.
Probeer om het echt op te
50.
No, het is
50.
al zo ellendig.
50.
helemaal omhoog. Je mag hier niet meer heen. Je mag niet meer heen. Even omdoen, ja?
Slaan nog hier, neem een beetje.
Ja, ja, maar ben jij nog gedaan? Wat ben jij al doen? Tot de bus vol. Wat is het? Ja, en dan ik ga nog een keer. Oké, ik weet het. En dat is tijd. Kijk, dan gaat ze niet zijn als de dansers komen, maar ja, dat heeft wel uitgehaald. Dus het is alleen maar voor de pro's, want als ik ga
Ik weet niet waar op gaat. Waar je bal? Waarom? Mijn naam is Kleine Chris.
Applaus.
Mijn naam is Kleine Yves. Mijn naam is Kleine Riri. Mijn naam is Kleine Hugo.
Mijn naam is Kleine Broes.
Mijn naam is Kleine Marina.
Mijn naam is Kleine Vito.
Mijn naam is Kleine Pasha. Mijn naam is Kleine Gina. Wij, kinderen van de Bijlmer, zijn blij een kindervoorstelling te presenteren. Een verzameling van historische bewegingen en van lichaamskunst. Een kunstvoorstelling is breed, duidelijk, eenvoudig en vrijwillig. Het maakt gebruik van basismateriaal, zoals het lichaam, de hersenen, de liefde en de wil. Gewoon ruimte en tijd. Gewoon besluitvaardigheid. Gewoon leven. Voordragen is direct. Regressie, wild. Terug naar de basis van kunst. Voordragen zijn vrije bewegingen en bijzondere liefde. Voordragen is energie, gevaar, impulsief. Voordragen is onze wereld. Dit zullen wij u laten zien in 5 hoofdstukken. Geboorte, liefde, gevaar, melancholie, gekheid. Hoofdstuk 1. Geboorte. Het hoofdstuk gaat over geboorte. De kunstenaar verschijnt in de wereld. Zelfbevestiging. Ik verstap mij niet meer achter mijn werk. Ik leef. Ik kan bewegen, ademen, de wereld ontdekken. Ik kan experimenteren met de beperkingen van mijn lichaam en binnen de universele wetten. Ik ben geboren en zal opgroeien. Saburo Murakami, Breaking Through Many Paper Screens, 1956. Dankjewel, kleine Hugo. Robert Morris, iBox, 1962. Dankjewel, kleine Vito. Jirico Panda, november 1976. Van klas K Namaste, Praag, 1976. Dankjewel, kleine Chris. Tito Akonti, Great Marks, 1970. Dankjewel, kleine Marina. Hoofdstuk 2, liefde. Dit hoofdstuk liefde betekent contact, ontdekking van het andere, begrip van de ander, stevige banden, maar ook een sociaal spel, gebaseerd op seksen. Omdat wij jongens en meisjes zijn, moeten wij onze kant kiezen. Dus acteren volgens onze seksen. Geen andere mogelijkheid. Gina Payne, Action Sentimental, 1973. Dankjewel, kleine Gina. Joseph Bice, How to Explain Pictures to a Dead Hair, 1965. Dankjewel, kleine I. Lydia Clark, Hands Dialogue, 1966. Dankjewel, kleine Vito en kleine Jiri. Marina Abramovic Ulay, Impodebrabilia, 1977. Dankjewel iedereen. Yuri Kovanda, Contact, 1977. Dankjewel iedereen. Marina Abramovic, Art Must Be Beautiful, 1975.
Art must be beautiful. Artists must be beautiful.
Art must be beautiful. Artists must be beautiful. Art must be beautiful. Artists must be beautiful. Art must be beautiful. Artists must be beautiful. Dankjewel, kleine Gina. Martha Rosler, Semiotics of the Kitchen, 1975. This is a spoon. This is a, I don't know. This is whatever. This is a brush. This is whatever. Dankjewel, kleine Marina. Hoofdstuk 3. Boosheid, gevaar. Hoofdstuk 3 gaat over boosheid en gevaar. Directe kwaadheid, roekeloze kunst, stomme inzettingen, wreedheid voor de ander en jezelf. De voorstelling gaat ver boven de grenzen, boven de angst. Voorstellen doorbreekt het verbod. Marina Abramovic, Freeing the Voice, 1976. Dankjewel, kleine Jus. Paul McCartney, Whipping a Wall and a Window with Paint, 1974. Dankjewel, kleine Marina. Vito Acconti, Blindfold Catching, 1970. Dankjewel kleine Gina en dankjewel kleine Fiete. Chris Barden, shoot. 1971. Dankjewel kleine Hugo en dankjewel kleine Marina. Tito Akonki, Katie Dylan, Praying, 1971. Dankjewel kleine Vito en dankjewel kleine Nina. Chris Barden, 747, 1973. Dankjewel kleine Yves. Hoofdstuk 4. Neerslachtigheid. Hoofdstuk 4 gaat over neerslachtigheid. Dromen. De kunstenaar is een eeuwige vreemde. Niet aangepast aan de wereld. Altijd erbuiten. Buiten het vreemd. Voorstellen is autisme. Stilte. Dagdromen. Yiri Kovanda. I look at the sun until I cry. 1977. Dankjewel kleine Vito. Gino de Dominicis. Tentativo di Follow. 1969. Dankjewel kleine Chris. Adrian Piper, Catalysis IV, Frozen Speech, 1970. Dankjewel, kleine Marina. Bastiaan Ader, I'm too sad to tell you, 1970. Dankjewel, kleine Vito. Hoofdstuk 5, gekheid. Hoofdstuk 5 gaat over gekheid, regressie, stomme spelletjes, tonen van onvolwassenheid, creatieve ijdelheid, gekke spellen. Optreden is serieusheid in stomheid. Bruce Nauman, Slow Angle Walk, Beckett Walk, 1968. Vito Akonki, Step Piece, 1970. John Baldessari, I'm Making Art, 1971.
I'm making art. I'm making art. I'm making art. I'm making art.
Bruce Nauman, Self-Portrait as a Patient.
I'm making art.
1967.
I'm making art. 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 I'm making art.
Hugo Ball, Caravan,
I'm making art.
1916.
I'm making art. 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 I'm making art.
Tom Marioni, 1 Second Sculptor,
I'm making art.
1969.
I'm making art. I'm making art. I'm making art. I'm making art. Garfan. I'm making art. Garfan. I'm making art. Garfan. 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 I'm making art. Garfan. I'm making art. I'm making art. Garfan. Garfan. I'm making art. I'm making art. I'm making art. I'm making art.
Dank u voor uw aandacht. Tot ziens. Dank u wel voor uw aandacht. Tot ziens.
Okay, let's start this seventh lecture at this Bijlmer Spinoza Festival. The title of this lecture is Subject Without Subjectivity. And the question who am I, or the question what is a human being, what is the very condition of a human being, what is the ontological concept of human existence, is of course not one question, one philosophical question among others. Of course, everyone is touched by this question because it is the question, all other questions, like the question of freedom, like the question of justice, like the question of the sense of being in general, or the sense of existence, is connected to this fundamental question: who am I? What is a human being? And this question, of course, is flanked, or is connected to the question of sense and the question of meaning. The meaning, for example, of human existence. So, has human existence any meaning? And if there is any meaning, who generated, or who installed this meaning? Is there a kind of divine plan deciding about the ontological condition of the human existence? Or does such a plan not exist? So the question, who am I, is the fundamental philosophical question concerning the universal being of the human being. And this question was answered through this history of philosophy, through this whole tradition of Occidental philosophy. This question was answered in a kind of different way. But in Greek philosophy, for example, the first definition that Greek philosophers like Aristotle gave to this to the ontological status of the human being is that the human being is first, it's an animal that is able to speak, an animal that is able to produce sense, an animal that is able to produce meaning. And the definition in Aristotle, for example, is a human being is an animal, and so on in old Greek words, and so on, logon, echon. It's an animal that has the capacity, that has the logos, that is the owner of a kind of logos, and logos is the Greek word for reason, and also for legein is the verb of this substantive logos, and legein means to speak, to be able to speak, to be able to produce sense by speaking, to be able to produce sense by communicating sense. And the definition of the human being in Aristotle is the human being is primordially defined by its capacity to speak, to communicate, and to produce sense by communicating sense, or by sharing sense in this order of communication that I call the order of facts, or the order of established reality. This kind of logos universe, if you want. And to define the human being as zoon logon echon, or later in Latin as animal rationale, that's a Latin version of this definition given by Aristotle. The human being is an animal rationale, an animal that has a capacity of kind of that is an animal that a reasonable animal, an animal able to think, an animal able to build up a whole universe of meaning, a whole universe of sense, and a whole universe of thinking. And of course, this universe of the logos is the universe of language. So the very definition, the Greek definition, the Aristotelian definition of the human being is connected to the concept of language. So, and definition is formulated by the distinction between the simple animal, the animal that is not an animal rationale, or that is simply this what Aristotle calls kind of the naked life of a kind of zoon. Zoon is the Greek word for an animal that has not this human capacity to speak or to produce sense or to communicate in this kind of senseful communication that is the logos communication. So there's a difference between the simple animals, there's a distinction between the simple animals and the human being as zoon logon echon, who as animal rationale, and that's a very powerful concept, powerful concerning the next centuries of European thinking, concerning this question, who am I? Who am I, me as a human being? I'm an animal able to produce sense, able to invent sense, able to communicate in a senseful way. Of course, there's still the question if there's not a kind of communication between the animals that doesn't make part of the order of the animals that we are, the human beings. And of course, also Aristotle agrees with the fact that there is a communication between animals, but the difference between the communication of the animals and the communication between human being is that the animals doesn't participate to the order of the logos, they do not participate to the order of meaning, they do not participate to the order of language in the human in the Aristotelian sense of language. So the question concerning the essence of the human being, or the nature of the human being, or the substance of the human being, is answered by in this old Greek tradition by connecting the human as the human being to the sphere of language, to the sphere of meaning, to the sphere of sense, and then in the development of the history of Western thinking or Occidental thinking, you find different concepts replacing or still in contact with this definition of Aristotle concerning the human being, replacing this concept or redefining this concept of human being opened up to the dimension of sense, opened up to the dimension of communication, opened up to the dimension of language. And for example, in Plato, you have the human being is addressed as psyche. Psyche is the Greek word for the soul, and the soul is thought as the immortal part of the human being. So already Plato is already dividing the human being into two parts, and the one part is simply the status of the psyche as incarnated soul that means the psyche between birth and death, and the second part, of course, is the more important part, and this is the immortal part of the psyche. And the psyche is, for example, in this early dialogue of Plato, the Phaedon, one of the most important early dialogues, the human psyche is defined as immortal. So the question, what is the human being? What is the ontological status, the ontological structure of the human being, is answered in Platonic philosophy, in the early Platonic philosophy, as the very essence of the human being is to be immortal, to be in an immediate contact with the order of the immortal also ideas, and then being incarnated by being born, and then living its life as in the prison of the psyche, living its life in the prison that is its mortal body. So the whole life period of the Platonic subject is a kind of is a kind of period of alienation. The psyche alienated in its own body, and later, just to mention it, in Michel Foucault made a kind of reversal of this Platonic idea that the psyche is incarnated, or that the body is the prison of the psyche, by saying the psyche is the prison of the body. So there's a just to give an example for this very anti-Platonic gesture, not only of the thinking of Foucault, but of the thinking of the philosophy of the 20th century in the whole. Then in the Christian tradition, that is quite depending, the Christian tradition of philosophy, that means that depends, that is very affected, very much influenced by Platonism and by Aristotle, especially by Aristotle. The early thinking of medieval philosophy, it's more Platon, and then more and more Aristotle became important, for example for Thomas von Aquinas in the 13th century. And in this tradition, in this Christian tradition, or with Heidegger, you can say in this kind of onto-theological period of medieval philosophy, the human being is defined as ins creatum. I mentioned that before in another lecture. Ins creatum, created by a creator, that is the Christian God. And then you have this kind of cut, or this kind of the invention of a new period in the history of philosophy, that is the modern period, starting with Descartes and the invention of the cogito, of the ego cogito, of the definition of the human being as res cogitans, as a thing that is able to think, so quite close to the conception of Aristotle, the human being as zoon, logon, echon. So that's the Cartesian version of the zoon, logon, echon is the definition of the human being as res cogitans. And the res cogitans is, so we have a kind of dualism in this Cartesian philosophy, a dualism that is again the dualism between the domain of the psyche and the domain of the body. And the domain of the body, or the domain of the simple objects outside of the system of the psyche, or of the ego cogito, sorry, is called in Descartes the domain of the res extensae. That means of the things that take some space in this constituted field of reality. So that is the difference, or this distinction that Descartes invented in the philosophy, that the ego cogito is something different than only a res extensa, and it's in a way, you can say, in the vocabulary that I invented in the lectures before, that the ego cogito is has the status of a subject, of a thinking subject. It is a thinking thing, a thing that is able to think, but the thing that is able to think is a subject, and what the subject is thinking, its object, the objects of its thinking are called res cogitans, or res cogitans. Okay, and so you have this next step in the history of philosophy, and then it continues. The definition of the human being continues. So I just mentioned some steps. For example, in the philosophy of Spinoza, the human being is called a modus. Modus is the word with which Spinoza is addressing the human being. A modus, that means a kind of modality of what? The dimension of the creator, the Christian dimension of the creator. is translated in a way in this in Spinoza's thinking into that what he calls the natura naturans, and he makes the difference between these two orders of if you want reality on the one side, the object reality on the one side. The created universe is the universe of natura, of the natura naturata. Natura naturata is the nature as created nature, and the dimension of the creator is called in Spinoza's thinking natura naturans, and I think it's very important to understand that this dimension of the natura naturata, of the natura naturans, has no positive, has only a kind of indirect representation in the universe of the natura naturata, in the natura naturata universe. So in the established reality. So it's not the question. It's not again a two-world model invented by Spinoza, but it's much more insisting on the fact that there is a dimension of God, the dimension of the natura naturans, but the being status of this dimension is not clear at all, because in a way God is only existing in by being represented by for example by the modus that is the human being, and so that's in a way why Spinoza, even if he speaks so much about God and this dimension of the natura naturans, was accused to establish a kind of atheism and atheistic philosophy. So the question is how for today, how can we continue with the philosophical tradition, continuing finding an answer to the question, what is the human being? Is there an essence of the human being? Is there a substance of the human being? Is there something like an idea of human being? Or do we have to accept, and that's why I called this lecture Subject Without Subjectivity, or should we accept that the singular subject, the singular human being only exists without, disconnected from any phantasmatic divine plan, or from any Platonic idea concerning the nature of the subject, or also disconnected, of course, from this metaphysical concept of a soul, that means of a psyche. And for this, of course, after Spinoza, who made a first step in this direction, Nietzsche became very important. Nietzsche, who insisted on the fact that a human subject, if there is a human subject, it is a human subject disconnected from any ontological prescription. Any ontological prescription, that means any ontological program. And so if there's no program, the very being of the human being is in this, to invent its own program, to write the program for himself, in a way. So that means the ontological structure of the human subject is qualified by this by a kind of openness towards the dimension of the undefined, or the dimension of a kind of emptiness. And this emptiness I would define this dimension of emptiness as the dimension of contingency concerning the nature, concerning the essence of this subject without essence, of this subject without subjectivity. And that means that the whole responsibility for what I am, who I am, that is the question, and the whole responsibility for what I am is on my shoulders as a subject. So I can't. There's no possibility to define myself by a decision concerning my essence, concerning my substance, the decision of someone else, the decision of a god, or with Lacan you can say the decision of the symbolic order, or le grand autre, or the big other. But because if God not exists, if the symbolic order does not exist, like Lacan taught us, then the human subject finds itself in this kind of desert, in the kind of desert that I would call, with Sartre and with Lacan in a way, with both of them, the desert of freedom. The desert of freedom, that means the subject finds itself in a kind of ontological poverty, an ontological poverty like I would like to call it. And this poverty means simply that it is a subject of a kind of essential solitude. It is a subject a subject without subjectivity. That means a subject that has to invent its own essence, that has to invent its own sense, that has to affirm itself as a subject of a kind of a freedom that is not easy to live in a way. And so the definition of the subject without subjectivity that I want to propose is the subject without subjectivity is the subject of ontological poverty. It's a subject disconnected from any concept of nature, any concept of essence, any concept of program, of divine being, of divine program, disconnected from any idea of God in a way. So in this new field of immanency, without transcendency, the subject is absolutely responsible for its own essence, because there's this lack of essence, there's this lack of substance. It has to invent its own concept, or if you want, its own subjectivity. And I would say there is a kind of subjectivity of a subject, but only as the subjectivity of a subject without subjectivity. And this is the what I would call the desert situation of the human being, the desert situation that demands from the human being or from the human subject to affirm itself as a subject of self-determination. So not being determined by a divine plan, not being determined by an existing program, not being determined by society, by the symbolic order, but in touch with the very limit of the symbolic order, in touch with the very limit of established reality, in touch with the limit of this kind of ontological void, to invent its own to invent itself as a subject of freedom, a subject of freedom, that means a subject of essential solitude, or a subject of what I would call a kind of non-identity. So if there is, of course, as I tried to develop in the lectures before, there is a kind of identical status, what I call the object status of the human subject. But if the subject is a subject, that it becomes necessary to accept that the identity of the subject being codified, being hyper-codified or hyper-determined in this field of established meaning makes only part of this object, of the object status, of the commensurability status of the subject, and this is not everything. If there is something like a subject, we have to insist on the necessity that the subject is more than an object. That means that it is always a kind of that the dynamics of subjectivity is in this in the surpassing or in the transgression of my own object status towards the dimension of this ontological emptiness, or this ontological freedom, or this ontological solitude, or this dimension that I call the dimension of incommensurability, or with Nietzsche, the dimension of chaos or becoming, with Deleuze and Guattari, becoming, or the same like Nietzsche, or the dimension of empty universality, or with Alain Badiou, or the dimension of absolute freedom in the sense of Sartre, or nothingness in the sense of Sartre too, being a nothingness, and or the dimension of the exterior, le dehors, in the sense of the French writer and philosopher Maurice Blanchot. So what is a subject without subjectivity? It's a subject, and here I feel close not only to Derrida but also to Emmanuel Levinas, another French philosopher. The subject without subjectivity is a subject that is originally delivered to this order of incommensurability, and that means it is a subject that is responsibility, 100% responsibility for all his acts and for all his thoughts and all his decisions. Okay, that's the comment for today. Thank you.